Hey, what's good, everybody? I'd like to welcome you guys back to the Boombox Guru channel. I'm your host, LB. So today, I have an album review for you guys. This is a different one, though. I'm actually going to be reviewing a box set, a little mini box set that I've owned for about 6 years now. And that box set is Discovering Devin Townsend. This came out in 2016 on Inside Out Records. It's a limited 5 CD box set. Has solo albums from Devin Townsend from early in his career, and it's a really great comprehensive work of Devin's early career. Man, it's a lot of great music on here, and I've highly enjoyed it. My introduction to Devin Townsend was actually in 2016 when he was coming out with the Transcendence album with his Devin Townsend project band, and I bought that CD because I was intrigued. I had watched the interviews from him, and I was really interested in the guy. I really dug, his whole personality and everything. So I bought that album, enjoyed it. Then I came across this little box set that had his early solo records, and I bought it. And this right here is what essentially made me a fan of his music, because it really showcased how talented he is. And for those who don't know who Devin Townsend is, man, he's a multi-instrumentalist from Canada, singer, songwriter, musician, record producer. He was the founder of extreme metal band Strapping Young Lad, which he was the primary songwriter and vocalist from 94 to 2007. And he also has a extensive solo career. He's released over a total of 25 albums across all of his projects, from his solo stuff, from his Devin Townsend band, the Devin Townsend project, to other stuff that he's done. His music is primarily rooted in heavy metal, but he takes a very eclectic approach to it. He blends it with like hard rock, ambient, new age, things that you wouldn't typically expect to hear in your, I guess, average metal artist or band. People have compared him to Frank Zappa, although he has said in interviews that he never really was a big fan of Frank Zappa. He was more of a Captain Beefheart type of guy. He's also known for his trademark production style, which he uses a heavily multi-track wall of sound. Some people have called him the Phil Spector of heavy metal because of that. He has a great vocal delivery, which ranges from screaming to an opera-esque singing style. And his music tends to express the different aspects of his personality. And listening to Devin Townsend is an experience. I got to tell you that, and it's an experience that I've enjoyed ever since I got into him. So without further ado, let's get into this video. And I just want to kind of briefly talk about some of these albums in the box set. They come in like little mini sleeves and stuff like this. This is them. But yeah, let's start with the first album in the box set, Ocean Machine, Biomech, released in 2007. Yeah, this was Devin's second kind of, or maybe you could say his third official studio album, but we're gonna say his second. One. Ocean Machine came out like around the same time that he had did the second Strapping Young Lad album, City. But a lot of these songs on here, they date back to like the early 90s. Like a lot of these songs Devin had been working on like ever since before he even joined Steve Vai's band. I forgot to mention that Devin's first major recording appearance was when he joined Steve Vai's band and they did the Sex and Religion album in 93. But Devin, a lot of these songs he had been demoing and working on ever since then. But the Strapping Young Lad thing started taking off, which he was also working on at the same time. He just had a whole bunch of work that he was working on as a solo artist, and the Strapping Young Lad music is what caught on first. So he focused on that, but he was still simultaneously working on his solo stuff. But in any regards, Strapping Young Lad was very known to be a very extreme metal band. Devin's solo stuff is more eclectic. It's more progressive, more avant-garde, and that's what you kind of get on this. That's what you do get on this record. It's still heavy. There's still some heavy riffs. Devin still, it packs a punch, man. But it's more melodic, more progressive, just more experimental in nature. It's not extreme. It's not brutal. The music on here is it's just a journey when you listen to the music, man. Every track on this album is good, and like I said, most of these songs Devin had been working on since the early '90s, and it was just throughout those years he continued to work on the music and continued to perfect it to get it to the place that he wanted. And so many great songs on here. I mean, from start to finish, man. Seventh Wave, Life, Night, High Nowhere, Voices in the Fan, Regulator, which is one of my favorite Devin Townsend songs, Funeral, Bastard, another favorite Devin Townsend song. Just every track on here is just wonderful, man. Just magnificent. There's not one weak song on this record. Originally, this album actually came out under the name Ocean Machine, and the title was Biomech. But when it was re-released, they put it out under Devin's name, Devin Townsend. So Ocean Machine became the title, with Biomech being the subtitle. But yeah, when this record originally came out, it didn't get much attention. It got overlooked by Strapping Young Lad City. That's what a lot more people in the metal community were focused on, was Strapping Young Lad. But I think in the years since, retrospectively, people have gone back and they've recognized what a great work Ocean Machine is. But really a great record. I think one of Devin Townsend's best solo albums. I think he did most of the music himself. I believe Gene Hoglan, who was also the drummer in Strapping Young Lad, as well as, who drummed for like Testament and of course Death, the death metal band Death. He did the drumming on here. I think Devin did most of the music. I think he might have had a few additional musicians to come in and help him out on certain songs on the record, but most of it was just him and Gene Hoglan. But just a great work of art, man. This is a metal masterpiece, in my personal opinion. I think it's one of the greatest metal albums to ever be released. So definitely one that I highly recommend you checking out if you want to get into Devin Townsend, man. This is a great listen. All right, so moving along, we're going to get to Devin's next album called Infinity, released in 1998. And let me tell you something, Infinity is also another one of my favorite records. Let me tell you something, Devin, man, he took the eclecticism and the avant-garde. He took it to the next level with this record. Of course, I think around the time that he was working on this album, he was having some mental health issues due to like drug use and things of that nature. I can't really get too deep into that. There's a podcast that Devin was doing a couple of years ago where he gets more in depth about what was going on in his life during the recording of some of these albums. But I do know that LSD had a big influence on the recording of this record, and you can tell in a lot of the songs. A lot of the songs have this very weird psychedelic approach to them. I mean, the first track on here called Truth, which is mainly like an instrumental. I believe Devin wrote that song while he was high off of LSD, and he somewhere during his high, he came up with this thing where he was like connected to God, or so he had some kind of spiritual awakening while he was tripping off the psychedelics. And he wrote this song, and you can kind of tell that he was kind of tripping off of something like serious. But it's a great song. It's a great song. It's mainly instrumental, except for the last part where you hear Devin come in with his vocals saying hallelujah. That's what I'm saying. He had like this spiritual like awakening or something while he was tripping off the LSD, man. But it's a great song. He actually re-recorded it with his Devin Townsend project band on the Transcendence album. It actually opened up the Transcendence album. But let's see, what's another great song? Christine is a really dope song. That was I think that was the single from the album. That was the single for the album. It kind of has a more like, sort of like a more mainstream kind of rock approach to it, but it's still a very heavy song. I really like the heavy riffs, and I kind of like the kind of groovy kind of rhythm that the track has. Bad Devil is one of my favorites on here as well. That is essentially a jazz metal song, because there's like a whole horn section and saxophones, and it really reminds me of something that Fishbone or Mr. Bungle or Faith No More would have did. It really has that kind of vibe, just where you're taking in all these different kind of elements outside of metal and you're fusing it with metal. But it's one of my favorite songs. It's it's very weird, man, but it's great. Soul Driven Cadillac is another great one. That song, uh, man, that's another one of those kind of, like, I guess psychedelic. Maybe he was tripping off of psychedelics when he was doing that, but that it's a beautiful song. It's just something. It's just very unusual, man. Like the whole approach to that song is just very unusual. It's heavy though. It's very heavy, but it's beautiful. And you just have to listen to the song to understand what I'm saying. I almost went over my other favorite song called War. War is another good one. I just really like that groovy rhythm of War. Like every time I listen to that song, I feel like that Michael Jackson would have fit perfectly on that song too. I don't know. It just has a rhythm that I feel like Michael Jackson could have jumped on and just really killed it, man. And Life is All Dynamics is another great one. So many great songs on there, but Infinity is very like avant-garde and experimental. So I enjoy it. It's one of my favorite Devin Townsend albums. I don't know if I would recommend new listeners to start off with this one. It might be a bit much starting off with this album because it's very out there. It's very avant-garde, but it's great work. It's another metal masterpiece in my opinion, man. It's a great collection of songs. I enjoy it, man. It's very out there. It's a very weird record, but the music is good. It's one of those albums where you're like, man, that sounded good, man, but what the heck did I just listen to? That's what that record would do. It will leave you questioning what you just listened to, even though it sounded great. But yeah, Infinity by Devin Townsend, man, this is a great record. Like I said, maybe Ocean Machine is probably a better choice to start with because this one is a little, it's out there, man. So it may be a bit much for new listeners, man, but I still think that it's one of Devin's best records. All right, so next album is Physicist, released in 2000. And interesting story behind Physicist. Devin's original idea for this record was actually to be a collaboration with him, Jason Newsted, who was still in Metallica at the time, and Gene Hoglan. But that didn't come out. That didn't really happen. It didn't come into fruition. Devin, again, if you check out the Devin Townsend podcast on YouTube, where he talks about Physicist, he goes more in depth about why that didn't happen. But so when that whole idea fell apart, Devin, he decided to write this record himself, and he recruited his Strapping Young Lad lineup to actually record the record. So what you get with Physicist is basically like a combination of that extreme, aggressive Strapping Young Lad sound with Devin's more eclectic solo material. That's what you get with this record. And in some cases it works, some not so much, but I think that Physicist is an enjoyable listen. It's been considered by a lot of people to be one of Devin Townsend's worst records. I know at one point Devin Townsend even considered this to be his worst album, but when I was listening to him discuss this album on his podcast, I don't think he really feels that way about it anymore, at least recently. He doesn't really feel that way about it no more. He still doesn't think that it's his best work, but he doesn't really look down on the album as much as he used to. He kind of accepts it for what it is. He feels like that the record came out the way that it should have at that time. But he does say that, he didn't really try that hard on this record. There's a lot of songs on here where he just kind of just phoned it in, and he tried to cover it up with like distortion. And I think that's one of the biggest critiques about the record is the production. It's not that great. I personally don't mind the production. I'm not really a guy that's very like particular when it comes to like production, especially in heavy metal in particular. I'm not really one of those guys that's really that like nitpicky about the production. But I enjoy this record. I really like it. It's not as good as the previous two records I've talked about, but I still dig it. I still like that whole kind of combination of the Strapping Young Lad sound with Devin's style, with Devin's solo style, because the first three tracks are like some of the heaviest. I mean, Namaste, Victim, and Material, like straight up thrash metal numbers. And then you get to Kingdom where things kind of slow down a bit. Death, Beyond, everything else kind of picks up the heaviness, but it just kind of blends so well with that more like avant-garde, progressive style that Devin is known for with his solo work. And speaking of the song Kingdom, uh, the original version of Kingdom first appeared on Physicist. Devin would later re-record that album with his Devin Townsend project on the Epic Cloud album. The re-recorded version actually has gone on to become very super popular. It's super popular now, especially amongst a lot of the metal reaction channels on YouTube. As a matter of fact, I would say that Kingdom is a song that really helped to propel metal reaction channels to where they are now, because a lot of the non-metalhead reactors, they Kingdom was like the first songs that they reacted to, and it was also the song I would say helped a lot of their channels to blow up. So you could say in a sense that Devin Townsend was responsible for the metal reaction channels being as popular and as trendy as they are now, because a lot of those channels will react to Kingdom, and their like reactions, their expressions when they would hear the song is what really helped a lot of those videos to become super popular. But in regards, man, despite what people may think about Physicist, I think that it's a great record. You know, if, on its own, I would probably say that it's one of his best on his own. But within the category of these albums, you know, it's not the greatest, but it's still an enjoyable listen. So definitely check it out. All right, so next album we have is Terria, released in 2001. And Terria has been described as Devin's most beautiful record, and I can agree with that. Well, maybe not his most beautiful record, one of his most beautiful records, because Devin has such an extensive catalog. He's got several albums that you can consider his most beautiful, but it's one of his most beautiful records. You know, when I was reading other reviews, what other people had to say about this record, that seemed to be the most consistent description about this record, was that it was one of his most beautiful records. And yeah, I agree with that. It is a beautiful album. It's still rooted in metal, but it's just a lot more ethereal, a lot more atmospheric. Just a great record. I mean, the song called Mountain, Every Earth Day, Canada, those are some of my favorite Devin Townsend songs right there. The first part of the album, I would say once it gets, yeah, the first few songs on the album I really enjoy, but I would say after Down and Under, the album kind of loses it for me. And it's not because it starts to sound bad or anything. It's just that although this is considered one of Devin's most beautiful records, it also has a very somber, melancholy vibe to it. And because Devin, you know, throughout these records, Devin had been going through a lot of personal stuff, and Terria was kind of like him coming at the end of those struggles in some way. And so you kind of get a very somber, melancholic like vibe from this record, and it's most evident on those last few songs. And I still think those songs are great, but for me, I have to be in kind of a certain mood to really appreciate those last few songs on here. Yeah, the last 4 songs, I have to be in sort of kind of a mood to really appreciate them for what they are. So most of the time after Down and Under, I usually don't even finish the album. I usually go to something else. But I still think that this is one of Devin's best records. I mean, if you put it up against Physicist, you could say that Terria is a bit better. You could say that Terria is better. But in any regards, man, I still think it's a wonderful record. You know, I just like the kind of unusual like time signatures and rhythm of Mountain. I like Earth Day. Deep Peace is really cool as well. It starts off very mellow and somber, but then it gets heavy as the song goes along. Canada is a great track as well. And speaking of that, I believe this album was inspired by Canada. I think when him and his band was touring, he was looking out at the landscapes of the country, and it inspired him to really write this album. And I think in a sense that Terria is sort of like an ode to his homeland, which is Canada. But yeah, I still think that it's one of his best records. It's just that, you know, I really have to be in a certain kind of mood to really appreciate the record as a whole, because those last few songs seem to be the most melancholy, the most kind of somber of them. And you know, if I'm not really in that kind of mood, then I'm not really gonna really enjoy those songs that much. But in regards, man, I still think that it's a great record and one of his best records. So now we get to the last album in the box set, and that is Accelerated Evolution, I think this came out in 2003, I believe. It was either 2002 or 2003. I think it was 2003, because I believe he recorded this album and the self-titled Strapping Young Lad record. I think both of these records came out around the same time. But this was actually Devin's first album released under the Devin Townsend band name. So what he did was at this point, he had got his own lineup for his solo work instead of using like some of the Strapping Young Lad members, or I guess maybe friends or session or musicians to come in and help him out. He actually gathered up his own stable lineup for his solo stuff, and he called it the Devin Townsend Band. So Accelerated Evolution, I think that it's a good record, but to me, I kind of feel like that this is kind of more of like the weaker one in the bunch, as opposed to Physicist, like some people will say. Don't get me wrong, Accelerated Evolution has a great collection of it has a good collection of songs. These are solid songs, but most of the music on here is more like straightforward hard rock and heavy metal. It's more of that style. So with the previous records of Devin Townsend, he takes a more abstract and an eclectic approach to his music, to where listening to him is like an experience. It's like a journey almost. When you listen to any of these other records, it's almost like you're going through a journey, and you don't really get that with Accelerated Evolution. To me, this album is a bit more subdued compared to those. Like, there's really nothing unique that kind of pops out at you, and you're like, wow, I can't believe that, like that he was able to do that. He was able to take this and make this. It's nothing like that happens. It's just more straightforward. It's very toned down in my opinion. But it still has some really good songs on here. I mean, Deadhead is one of my favorites on here. I would say Deadhead is another one of my favorite Devin Townsend songs. And when I first got into Devin Townsend, I would watch a lot of live performances from him and his band, and Deadhead seemed to be a staple in his live sets. But it's a really good song. I would say that that's probably the biggest highlight on this record. Away is another great one. Sunday Afternoon. Let's see here. Slow Me Down is a great one. Depth of Charge, which opens up which opens up the album. That was a great album opener. But there's a lot of good songs on this record. I would say all the songs on here are really good. It's just that they don't really pop out. When you listen to this record, it's not gonna give you that feeling like, man, I can't believe I just witnessed this with my own ears, or man, that was an experience to go through. You just don't really get an experience with listening to this album like you do the other ones. But all in all, man, it's still a good album. I think this is probably the most accessible album out of the bunch. As like, if you're a new listener coming into Devin Townsend, this would probably be the one that you would probably want to start with, because it's not really heavy on the experimental and abstract type stuff. It's just more of a straightforward hard rock and heavy metal record. So it's a little bit easier to take in. And a lot of these songs, in my opinion, they have the potential to be like radio singles, because it's actually far better than a lot of the mainstream hard rock and metal that was being played around that time. A lot of the songs on here, you put it up against a lot of that mainstream stuff that was out back then, this record would trump a lot of that stuff. I mean, the album is, one thing I can say about this record is that even though it may be a bit more toned down compared to the other records, it is consistent throughout. It does have a consistent sound throughout. But yeah, I enjoy the record, but I just think that it just doesn't have that avant-garde or eclecticism that the other records have. So, I listen to it, but I don't listen to it as much as the other ones, man, because I'm a guy that kind of leans a little bit more towards that experimental, kind of out of unorthodox type of style when it comes to Devin Townsend. I appreciate that part of him. So I prefer the other ones over this one, but it's still a great record to listen to. Like, if you want to just casually listen to Devin Townsend, I mean, I think this record would be a good one to really check out. But that's it for this video. That's my review of the Discovering Devin Townsend box set, limited 5 CD box set. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you never listened to Devin Townsend, I highly recommend that you maybe go on Amazon. If you're somebody that still buys physical music, physical CDs, go on Amazon and see if they still have any copies of this left and purchase it yourself, man. I'm telling you, when I purchased this, that was probably the best thing I ever did, man, because it made me a fan of who I think is one of the greatest artists out here that a lot of people don't know about and they should know more about. But yeah, Devin Townsend, he's just a great artist, man. Like I said, I hope to see him live one day, and I hope that this video will inspire somebody who may have never listened to Devin Townsend, or who may want to get into Devin Townsend. Maybe they'll check out some of these records, check out some of these songs, and they'll become a fan too, man. That's really what I want to do with this channel, is kind of put people on to other music as well. But yeah, that's it for this video. Hoping you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, do me a huge favor, hit that thumbs up and give me a like. Helps with the algorithm. Also, be sure to hit the subscribe button and tap that bell. That way you'll be notified when I drop new content. I want to thank everybody that's been subscribing to the channel. Everybody that's been watching the videos, that's been showing your support. I truly appreciate it. And as always, hope everybody has a blessed day, a blessed week, and love, peace, and music. Peace out, y'all.